So, welcome to Parenting Course. Well done on catching up. You know, in South Africa, we're still sun-tanning at this time of the day, and it's like midnight for us. It got dark at about 4:15 this afternoon, but we're acclimatizing slowly. My experience is that people like you who pitch up and prioritize attending either a marriage course or parenting course aren't the people who have problems. People who have problems in marriages or problems with parenting are actually the ones who don't come. But the people who want to learn more about themselves, their relationships with the people they really love, be it a partner or be it their kids, they're the ones who come along so they can avoid problems when they come along. So we're going to do a little journey with you where it's almost like a car service. I don't know what it's like in the UK, but in South Africa, in your owner's handbook, you have to take a car in for a service about every 10,000 miles or something like that. And one of my frustrations is driving a car that goes in perfectly well. I could drive it to the garage. There was nothing wrong with it. And then I fetch the car and I get an exorbitant bill for them because they fixed all the things that I didn't know was wrong with the car. Now, a parenting course is something like that. You're just bringing your parenting skills into the greenhouse, to a workshop for a bit of a tune-up. And hopefully you'll be able to take away some things from the 4 sessions that will help you as parents, but also help you as partners. Because one of the tricks of parenting that we learned was to count to 10 before we answered our kids, till we sort of concur on what the right answer was. So much of what we talk about will be about your relationships with kids, but the flip side of that coin is the opportunity to visit your own relationship. Because what your kids see you do is something that they really learn to do more than what you tell them to do. So it's more important to be seen doing the right thing than necessarily telling people to do the right thing. So that's where we're going now. The next few weeks are going to be fun for us. Anton and Sharon gave a gracious introduction. It was lovely, Sharon. Thank you. I can't wait to hear what I'm going to say. Could be good. But we thought maybe just introduce ourselves a little bit. We don't see ourselves as experts. And that's quite important. Although between us, we have about 10 degrees. That's more a statement of our curiosity than our intellect. We like finding out about stuff. We self-classify as lifelong learners. There was quite reluctance initially when Sharon asked us to do a parenting course because we thought, we're old and decrepit. The best thing about being a parent for me is that our kids have all left home. What can we talk about parenting that could be relevant? And the answer to that was, we embarked on a little journey of discovering the challenges that many of you had that didn't even exist when we were parenting. And we got really excited about the content. So Sharon's random request sent us on a trajectory of very, very interesting fact gathering about all sorts of things. So we're going to present the parenting course not based on what everyone's done over the years. And there are some good parenting courses, but some fairly cutting edge stuff that will hopefully help you do a lot better. So the main thing about this pilgrimage through life has taught us that while the answers are great, the questions are more important. Because if you ask the questions, you open yourself up to other right answers. And there's a whole adage, one of the biggest tragedies in life is when you go the extra mile, but in the wrong direction. So asking the questions is so important in parenting better and in being a better spouse. The other big idea that we discovered is the truth in that old adage, it takes a village to raise a child. And we're very much cognizant of the fact that while we're loving being part of your village, this isn't home for us. And when we're back suffering in the sunshine, lying next to our pool, sipping pina coladas or whatever they are, you'll be shivering in Hurst. This is your village. And if you look around the room, these are the inhabitants of your village. And we'd love to be able to leave in the middle of December having left behind a bunch of people who are here for each other. while we'd love to be here for you, reality is we've got kids and grandkids who are more important than you. So we're going back to be used and abused by our kids, but you, the village, stays right here. So we're hoping that one of the big success stories will be the fact that you've made new friends, that you've learned from each other. We in the learning curve, I discovered that it's possible when you're 40 years old to toot out 3 kids in quick succession. And if you don't believe me, you can find out in this room how to do it. Because you bring the collective genius of your own parenting experience, which I'm hoping will be something that you'll learn and be comfortable sharing with each other long after we've gone home. So that's the broad thing. Over to Sue for a bit of who she is.
Okay, a little bit about who I am. I'm 66 and holding. I did train as a teacher at first, and then when I had my kids, I was at home with them, doing those things that moms do, running playgroups, selling toys, making tracksuits, sewing for a design company, all sort of juggling around young kids. And then I hit a crisis point. You'll hear about our children later, but one of my daughters at about age 10 hit an extremely anxious phase, and I had no idea what was going on with her. And the psychologists and psychiatrists that we saw were very, very confidential, wouldn't give me any diagnosis, any labels, any information. There was no Google in the mid-90s. There were no, and actually anxiety and depression was a very shameful sort of thing. You didn't talk about it, it was all hidden away, and I had no idea what was happening to her. I didn't even have a name for it. And I started reading books because I tried to gain understanding to alleviate the terrible guilt I felt as a mom and how it perhaps failed my child. And so what Ant did is he said to me, buying so many books, why don't you enroll for Psych 1 at university, which I did. And I took to studying at the age of 38 like a duck to water. I loved it. And then just answered so many questions, but gave me more questions. And as I got to my honors year, I started wondering, how does faith and psychology integrate, work together? Because my faith was a strong thing. Psychology was so fascinating. I just loved it. And so in my master's at Stellenbosch, I did an integration between psychology and theology. And when I had finished, obviously I wanted to set up a private practice, but you don't just open your door and people arrive. So for 5 years, I then lectured part-time at the master's course that I trained in, and then set up my practice. And as I worked with people, I realized how important marriages were in all circumstances of life, and got so many couples that I specialized in couples therapy. So I have done that for 20 years. It's been a wonderful, rich career. I'm trying to taper off now. I'm trying to retire so I can have more time with my sweetheart. I also have a chronic lung condition which also has impacted my ability to work and be a granny and do all of those things. It's been quite hectic. But if I cough crazily, don't duck, it's not infectious. And if you see a gallbladder anywhere around, it's not mine, because mine was taken out 2 weeks ago. So
just as we were packing to come, her gallbladder left home. It's interesting. So I'm 72 and happy. Healthy as a horse, a very old horse, but quite a healthy one. I started work as a banker, and then like all South Africans of my vintage, I went and had to do national service. I stayed in the Air Force Reserve for about 23 years. Great experience, but certainly didn't help me in learning the skills required for so-called gentle parenting. I had to unlearn a whole lot of stuff to become a good parent to our daughters. Life for me was a meander through various things. I also started as a teacher, then lectured, was an HR manager at a multinational financial institution, then escaped and went into consulting, mentoring and coaching in churches, in non-profits, and for some government departments. Somewhere in between, we lived in Texas, and we were on church staff, and I did a master's in education and theology there. Sue was the one who got the real qualification. She got a PhD, put husband through. So she was my real support, my right hand, typed everything that I tried to write. She was the clever bit of my brain. Now I'm a sort of pastor and head up Scripture Union in South Africa, which is an organization something like Young Life. I'm the chairman of the board there. That's us, but that's not all there is to us. Now we're going to try technology. Don't hold your breath, you may asphyxiate. with the exception of Vaughan, who can hold his breath. Go and see how clever we are. Okay, screen mirroring, greenhouse TV. And there won't be death by PowerPoint, I promise you. These are the 3 slides that we will show you. And you just got to get them. And now Sharon says I must push the one that says play.
Present to external.
And present to external display.
Yeah.
Loading.
My gosh, we did it.
For somebody who's just mastering the art of using a chalkboard, you must appreciate just how there they are.
Okay.
That's why we're going home.
So these are 4 daughters. Starting on the right, that's Jenny Kate. She has a master's in social work and she's currently heading up a non-profit education foundation. She's married to Kurt. Oh, sorry, did you not hear that? Jenny Kate. Okay, so she has a master's in social work and is currently heading up a non-profit education foundation. She's married to Kurt and is the mother of 11-year-old twin girls. And then the next one is Emily. She's a registered dietitian with an international practice thanks to Zoom. She's married to Steve, a doctor, and they have 2 kids, a boy aged 8 and a girl aged 4. And then Hannah has a postgrad in psychology and is an international qualified coach in private practice, is married to Jono and is 7 months pregnant, which is a great joy for us at the moment. It was a long journey for her. And then number 4 is Lorato. She's 26. And last year she moved into a home for cognitively impaired adults.
And she's the only one who isn't married, so if you have a rich, eligible son, come and speak to me afterwards, please. But that's the tip of the iceberg. Those of you who saw the movie Titanic will know that the bit of the iceberg that you can see isn't what sunk the Titanic. Because the bottom of every iceberg is the real story of the iceberg. So the parenting for us, those 4, has been a journey through.
One who didn't walk until she was 2.5.
One of them who has a husband who has a stage 4 glioblastoma brain tumor.
2 of them had febrile convulsions and one stopped breathing a few times as an infant.
One of them has epilepsy.
One had tetanus and ended up in ICU as a teenager.
One is HIV positive.
2 left home straight after school to join YWAM and served in extreme third world countries in pre-mobile phone days.
One had a 2-year anxiety journey that Sue referred to when she was a preteen.
One is hearing and learning impaired.
One had a benign tumor on her head, resulting in a 5-year-old having her head shaved and operated on, followed by 2 plastic surgeries to cover the scarring.
One of them was adopted.
One had bad pregnancies that saw a kid resuscitated in the delivery room and then had to spend 17 days in a NICU.
One of them is pregnant, but only after a miscarriage and 4 rounds of IVF.
One of them has a child with juvenile arthritis.
ADHD and anxiety and depression has been part of the family journey.
Some of the grandchildren on Schedule 5 medication.
2 of our daughters had traumatic breakups.
With very stupid men. And that's probably what qualifies us more than anything else to talk about parenting and to dare to broach the subject with you people. Because notwithstanding our iceberg, we're actually quite a happy family tribe. 2 of our daughters live in the suburb we live in, one just around the corner. Their great delight is Sunday lunches at our house where they come and feed for the week that we've seen. One of the things you'll discover as your children leave home is when they come home to visit, if you have 2 of anything, one of them automatically belongs to them. So they will harvest your time, your spare loo paper, any leftover food. They'll dish up prodigious helpings for young children so they can take leftovers and have good supper that night. It's great. We love it, and that's our tribe. Now, how do we make ourselves relevant to you? And I'm going to switch that off because I don't want to distract you with my lot. Okay. Yes, gone away. Okay, and then we switch off the screen because we promise no more death by PowerPoint.
The one right at the top.
Oh, sorry. Okay, there we are. Okay. So how do we make ourselves relevant to you?
Oh dear, we
Oh,
got something else here.
Okay.
The coffee house behind the bar. There we go.
There, okay, good. As we embarked on this challenge of being relevant to the community that Sharon first invited us to, we approached the task with curiosity. Now, thanks to the Google that we didn't have as young parents, I could Google and I could do quite a bit of research. And some of the interesting stuff I found was that last year, UNICEF UK did extensive research into the challenges facing parents in the UK specifically. And amongst those challenges were things like parental mental health struggles. And this was documented for your country. Feelings of being overwhelmed and anxious as parents. Feelings of being unsupported. Feelings of very, very real loneliness, like we paddling this canoe by ourselves and their rapids approaching. We need help. Worries about the rising cost of living. Worries about the lack of affordable and quality childcare. The reality that parenting, we seem to be spending less and less time with our children because of long work hours, long commutes. We are amazed, staying with the Kloppers, that Sharon does probably 3 or 4 hours of commuting getting kids to school every day. And she has her own life to live. But that's the pain and the pleasure of parenting, talking to your kids in a bubble with a captive audience. It's wonderful. So you've got to maximize those things, but there are real things that add to pressures. And then the other one that's really interesting, parents in the UK are very concerned about media and the internet of all things. There's so much available to our kids. I learned from my grandchildren, these 11-year-old twins are very, very quirky. I fetch them from school every Monday. Sue prepares lunch for them. And one of the things that they love are little chicken meatballs. So my joke with my granddaughters is when we fetch them, I say, I've had a busy morning, I've been hunting chickens, and we're going to have chicken balls for lunch. And after about 3 weeks of this very rather sad grandfather joke, voice in the back of the car says, "Bumper," that's what they call me because I've got a bumper over here. "Bumper, chickens don't have balls." I said, "Oh really?" "No, they have coacres." It took me 72 years to learn that a chicken has a coacre, and I still don't know what it is, what it looks like, or what they do with it. But I learned from a 10-year-old. And that's one of the joys of parenting, that there's so much to learn as we listen to our kids. Because they have access to media and internet of all things, it actually also gives them information that we don't have. Now, all these things, unique by UNICEF research to the United Kingdom, but not unique to the role of parenting. These are the sort of universal things that we see everywhere. And the other thing that we tried to do is look at the context of parenting, because context to me is the sort of all-important thing about parenting, because no one knows exactly how hard it is. And people who face challenges of parenting have said things like this. What is happening to the youth of today? They disrespect the elders, they disobey their parents, they ignore the law, they riot in the streets, inflamed with wild notions. Some of those images we saw in South Africa of the riots about that happened around the UK, for which people are now being jailed. Now that was a real comment attributed to Plato, who wrote it 400 years BC. So problem kids aren't a new invention at all. The context of parenting tells us that there's nothing new under the sun. What has changed for us is the world that the sun shines on. And the simple thing for us as South Africans, when we grew up, we lathered ourselves in Johnson's baby oil. And you could parboil yourself lying in the sun and go as brown as a nugget. 40 years later, same sun shining, But when you go out, you put on factor 50 cream to prevent yourself getting the melanomas that we have for our sexy teenage tans, because the world that the sun shines on has changed. Medical science has taught us the dangers of sunshine in a world where the ozone layer is shrinking. So what we want to do from a context is actually sort of help us understand where we're at, but not be overwhelmed, rather adapting to some of the things around us. And then the last thing is we want to be cutting edge as possible. And this is the joy of doing our research. I discovered a book 3 days after it was published by a guy called Jonathan Haidt, H-A-I-D-T, called The Anxious Generation. And it's really an eye-opener to us. A New York professor of social psychology who's written about the devastating impacts that screens have on the youth of today. Screens that have robbed our children of a physical world and replaced it with a virtual world. A world of fantasy, a world shaped by Hollywood, shaped by people making money out of our kids. A world that isn't real, but a world that shapes their thinking. And we'll refer to this quite a bit, and it's a great book, I think, for all parents to read, because he doesn't just spell out the problem, he actually comes up with some fairly good solutions that we'll also weave into the next couple of days. So I'm hoping that as we work through these sessions, you'll sort of go back to a motto that Youth for Christ had in our youth. It was a motto that said, anchored to the rock, geared to the times. There's certain timeless principles that give us solidity and gravitas as parents, but we have to be geared to the times, or else our advice, our parenting, our mentoring falls on deaf ears. So that's where we're going. It's over to Sue to introduce a little bit of the theoretical background as to what underpins successful parenting in 2024.
Okay, I just want to start with an introduction about just a few points about parenting. And the first thing is that actually we're raising our children for their future. We're so taken up with the here and now and a survival mode and getting kids to do everything they have to do each day, but we're actually raising them to be future adults, and we need to keep that in mind and keep that as a very conscious part of our journey. And then how we were parented is hugely influential in our parenting. And I'm sure you've had those experiences where you've suddenly heard your mother coming out of your mouth and you thought, I would never wanted to be like that. So we've actually been socialized in a way that we actually have the good and the bad of our mothers in us or our fathers in us. And we have to consciously decide which of the pieces we are going to take on.
So
is this working?
go a bit closer.
Oh.
I think just for people at the back, it's a bit, yeah.
Is that fine? Can
Is
you
that
hear me
better?
now? Must I lower it a bit? Okay. Okay, is that better?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, all right. So we have to consciously decide what we are going to try and do. And I know we do slip up and we do our mother thing, but we have to consciously think about what it is that we want to do for our children that is different to the bad things that they did. And we've also got to look at the legacy that our parents gave us and think about what the legacy is that we want to give to our children. And if I think back on my mom, the legacy that I have from her is that she was a praying mom and she used to pray for me, and many a time I thought, oh, if my mother wasn't praying, I wouldn't have got through this. And so I have been a person who's tried to pray for my kids, and often my prayer for them has been, help, because I'm not coping. So yes, that has been a legacy that I've had. And Ant's legacy had a rich legacy from his mom. She was an amazing person. But Ant was mostly influenced by what his father was not. So I think that's also a legacy. You know, we can look at what our parents were not, and we can do the opposite, so we can do a better job than them. And then Ant did touch on the fact that it takes a village to raise a child, and this actually can become your village. I think sometimes, as Ant said, it's such an alone task, and sometimes when your kid's really acting out badly, you sort of feel like it's your fault, and you feel like, oh, you're the only one experiencing this. And you have conversations with other people and share your vulnerable spaces with them, you will discover that you are not alone, because parenting can be a very lonely task. And then the next point is that parenting is an investment. And you know that we spend more time giving than we ever do receiving when they're small. You know, you clean something, they dirty it, you make something, they eat it. And there's a lot of deferred gratification. And so just like a financial investment, when we put the money away, we have to realize that we will reap the rewards later. And it's so nice to be on the other side and to realize, actually, it does happen. You do reap the rewards later. We have to make a choice now, though. And I think we are feeling the rewards, not in perfection, definitely not in perfection, but we've seen how our kids have embraced many of our values and also the very authentic and warm connection we have with all of them. And then the last introduction point is about the urgent versus the important. And seeing Hannah, our third daughter, struggle with infertility has made us just see how important having a child, having your own child is. And when people struggle like that, just the pain of that and just the richness of having your own child. And they are, if you think of your kids, they are the most important things in your lives, aren't they? And yet the urgency of life just fills our lives. You know, our phones, we've got to get the shops, we've got to work, we've got to do all these things. And at the end of the day, sometimes all the urgent stuff supersedes the very important thing, the thing that's most important to us. So again, that is something we have to become conscious of. For every yes, there's a no. So every time we say yes to all the urgent things, or keeping someone happy, or going to a friend because, you know, we better do that, but our kids aren't happy with it, you know, what are we centralizing in terms of what is important? And now I'm going to look at attachment relationships, which is also quite a fascinating just idea, and I'm going to look at a little bit of neuroscience, which I also find really interesting. So attachment relationships are our primary relationships. So our relationships with our parents was an attachment relationship. Our relationship with our children is an attachment relationship. Our relationship with our partner is an attachment relationship. And people who have faith, their relationship with God is an attachment relationship. So an attachment relationship is something that affects and impacts our identity and how we see ourselves. So as parents, we are our children's person. We are their person. So when we walk into the room and our face looks angry and frustrated, it's like a mirror. And our kids look at our faces and go, oh, what have I done wrong? I've done something wrong. Mom looks upset with me. And they often take it on, especially the more sensitive child will go, oh, I've done something wrong. Or if mom looks happy or dad looks happy, it's like, okay, I'm all right. All is good. They are happy. So we become the mirror that they look into, and it does form their identity. And it's a really important part of parenting.
And just inside there, one of the peculiar things in the African culture, you may have seen pictures of the African mother with a baby strapped to her back, and she goes about her daily tasks. And there's lots of research coming out in South Africa now about how the children who are brought up strapped to mothers' backs really struggle at school because they don't read the social cues that other babies who have face contact with. So there's a whole move around carrying kids at the front and encouraging mothers to have face contact with their kids so the kids can learn what makes mom happy, what makes mom sad, and pick up a whole layer of stuff that generations of back-carried kids have actually lost out on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when we look at behavior, and all of us, this is just a general thing, when you look at behavior, whether it's a behavior of your friend or your parent or your child, whoever it is, there's behavior above the line. Below the line is the story we tell ourselves, which is our internal dialogue. And even all of you, while you're sitting here, you have, as you're listening to us, you have an internal dialogue going on where you're evaluating, you're thinking, you're questioning, is this right, wrong, whatever. We've got the story that goes on inside ourselves all the time in life. It's usually unconscious. If you start thinking about it, it does become conscious. But our children's internal dialogue and our partners, actually, there are 5 questions that happen all the time when they look at our behavior. And the first question is, do you really love me? In other words, am I lovable? Am I worthy of your love? How important am I really to you when you're running around doing everything else that I'm sort of stuck in the back here, you know, out of the way? Am I a priority for you? And am I enough? And so those are the questions that we need to be thinking about, that those what our children are picking up as they watch our lives. And these attachment bonds start really early. And I don't know, I'm sure you remember when you were in a group, either a group of friends, family, whatever, and you had your kid as a toddler sitting on your lap and they wouldn't move because they didn't know the place and they were unsure, and they sat geared to your lap. And then they see a toy over there, so they quickly move up, get the toy, run back and sit on your lap where they feel safe. After a while, when they feel a little bit safer, they can move a bit further away, maybe play a little bit, but they always look back. Is mom still there? Is dad still there? And they want to know that they are safe in the world. They can enter into the world safely because there's a person that they come back to. And they can go and explore and move away. And the whole point of this attachment is safe connection, that my mom and my dad are reliably there for me, and they can with confidence then move out into the world. And I think the question that our kids ask of us, and that actually we ask of our partners, is when I reach out my hand, will you be there for me? Now, realistically speaking, we can't be there all the time, but we know that when we can, they need to know we will be there. We will always get back to them. And the same with our partner. You know, we can't always be in contact, but when we really need them, will they be there for us? Our children ask it of us, we ask that of our partner, and maybe even in our prayers, we ask that of God when we pray. Will he be there for me? Will he answer my prayers? So the safe connection, what does it actually look like? And there's a very good acronym for it. And I think all my clients have heard this a million times over because it's so pivotal in all relationships. We want good connections, not just with our family, with our partners, with our children, but also with our friends. What does it actually look like? And the acronym is ARE. Are we accessible, responsive, and engaged? And that's what we really long for, isn't it? When we want to tell a story, is that person accessible to us to hear us? Are they responding and engaging with us? Because that makes us feel good and it makes us feel connected. And then regarding our children, we don't always get this right, do we? Sometimes we are completely unavailable, and sometimes we're intrusive, just like too much. How was school? What happened? What happened? What happened? Kids going, no, fine, nothing. You know, they don't give you much of an answer, and you just go on about it a bit too much. You want to know too much. And I think the challenge of parents is to be sensitive to when the child wants us to come close and when we need to give them space. It's not feasible or even practical to always be accessible to them. They need to know that as soon as we can, we will respond to them. They need to know that we're reliable in contact with them. So as I said, I did my master's, I started studying when I was 38. I did my master's full-time when I was 45. And at that stage, I had not the fourth wasn't a teenager, but 3 teenagers in the house. And it was an incredibly busy year. It was really crazy. And actually did all the cooking, and he did everything. I mean, he took over the...
That was a bad year. My kids got together and they ganged up against me, and they said they were going to collectively leave home unless I learned to cook. So at about 50, I went to Pick and Pays, like the Sainsbury's here. They had a executive cooking course, which I took for 8 weeks. And we ate chicken coq au vin. We ate all sorts of exotic things. It was fun, and I still love cooking.
He does. Anyway, I didn't have much time, and I think this is the thing about that whole thing about accessible and responsive and engaged. It's not about the amount of time. There's seasons in our life where we do not have the same time as other seasons. Seasons do change as well. But on the season when I didn't have time, and I know I was either away from home or was at my computer, I decided that whenever my girls walked into the room, even if I was busy with an assignment, I would stop, and it was inconvenient, and I would look up, and I would look into their eyes, and I would hear them. And if I did that, if I didn't push them away and say, go away, I'll come back later, give me time, it would always sort of linger on and on and on. It was like a dripping tap in the background. Whereas if I focused fully, it satisfied something in them. Mom's still here for me. And it often was very quick, and I could get back to my work very quickly. And so that quality of time is so important in the moments when they need you and you can be there for them. Give them that 100%. There's something very powerful about eye contact. It really feeds their soul, and there's oxytocin that gets released, and there's something very important that happens in those moments. And you know what? We're so busy in the sink, in the phones, in everything else, and it's simple and easy And when I asked Hannah, who was 13 at the time, years later, I said, do you remember that year I did my master's? Do you remember that I was just never there? She goes, Mom, no, I don't remember that. You were there for us. And so it's not quality, it is quantity, and it's how we're there for them, even in our crazy busy lives. So another example actually is Lorato, who's our fourth daughter, and she was a different kettle of fish because I used to love warm bedtime stories with my kids and Bible stories and talk about the day and lie in the bed with them. That was what I did with my kids. And with her, she was like, no, I don't want a story. No, go away now. And it was like quite devastating for me because I lost that very special time that I had with the other kids. And I had to learn to read her differently. And she sent me away many more times than she invited me in. But I had to wait until she invited me in. And I know this is hard for parents as well because we do feel that sense of, oh, I should be there, you know, but actually they'll come when they're ready. And I had to be sensitive to when she was ready. Even now, you know, I can put my arm around her and she'll duck away. And then sometimes I'll put my arm around her and she'll come into me. And I just got to accept that that's the way she is. So when our children experience us as either consistently unavailable or consistently intrusive, they then react by minimizing or maximizing. So the minimizer is the child who withdraws. They don't open up, they tend to be defensive, and they have rigid self-boundaries. The maximizer will tend to act out, exaggerate emotions and needs, could be clingy, and have very unclear self-boundaries. So my very wise mom always said, behavior reveals a need. What are they needing? Either when they're pulling away from us, whether they're minimizing, or whether they're maximizing. What is it they're needing? So sometimes they're needing just safe, reliable connection. I'm here, I'm giving you space. So they need to know you're still engaged, you're still there, but it's okay if you have space, that you don't sort of have an awkward space between them. It must be an engaged, comfortable space. It's a space that can either give space to them to be there or to receive them when they want to speak. So being the mirror that our children look into, give them clues about themselves. So we're shaping our children's self-awareness and their knowledge of who he is in the world and in fact their future selves and how they will operate in their own relationships. And I think as I work with couples and do marriage therapy with lots of couples, I see that often go back to like, what was your relationship with your mom like? What was your relationship with your dad like? Because often that's the blueprint of the relationship with your partner. And there's a pattern that you pick up. Now, obviously, in couples therapy, the healing comes if it's been a bad relationship with your parents. The healing can come within a safe, reliable connection with your partner. A lot of healing can take place. But a lot of the pain could be because you didn't have that good relationship, that safe connection previously, so you feel unsure and you feel maybe suspicious or not trusting or something like that. And so marriage can be a very healing space for that. So at this stage, I just quickly want to introduce a little bit on neurodiversity, because that is something that has become obviously a word that wasn't even used when we were raising children. It's become something that's more well known now. So also, you may have a child who's neurodivergent, you may not. But the point is you are going to have either a friend who has a neurodivergent child, or you're going to have someone in your church or in your community, in your school, with a neurodivergent child. So it's quite interesting to be able to learn about them and to gain some sort of understanding about them. I think that having a neurodivergent child profoundly impacts not only the child, but also the parent.
And the siblings.
The whole family, actually. So there's the neurotypical child, and that is the child whose brain is wired in a way that enables them to cope with challenges and to learn without complications. But the neurodivergent child's brain is wired differently. So if you think of neurodiversity, it's like the trunk of the tree, and the branches are the neurodivergent characteristics, such as ADHD, dyslexia, autism, OCD, etc., etc. And often these conditions give rise to anxiety and depression. And we have to understand this is not a disability, but it is a different wiring. And I think it's so important to say that and to know that. And just some kids can adapt, you know, the ADHD kids, some of them can adapt. And often these neurodivergent kids are extremely clever. Their brains are amazingly bright, and yet they're wired differently. And so some of them do adapt and can manage life quite well, but some actually need more support, and lots of parents actually need more support. They become easily overwhelmed by the neurotypical world. And later in our session on resilience, I'll expand more on this. But just the headlines about parents of neurodivergent children, they need lots of love, understanding, and support, and no judgment and all about their child's behavior. I think shame is a big feature not only of the kids, but also of parents with neurodivergent children. And I've got a very funny story that my friend told me the other day about her child who's neurodivergent, and he's now in his 20s and successful, and he's doing really well in life. But when he was about 8 or 9, he was in the garden with a hose watering the garden, and some friends arrived to play, and he didn't want them to play. And he put the hose into the lounge, full poly, and said, "They must go home now. I don't want them to come and play with me." And it was so embarrassing for her. And I think it was just what that child was in the moment. They're so literal, and they'll say things like that. And luckily, this friend's friend was very understanding. And so we can be judgmental of other children, and we can look at it as a discipline problem or a behavior problem, but actually, it's a difference in wiring, and it's a difference in the way that the child is operating, and we need to have lots of grace and lots of understanding for that.
Our grandchild, when you know, the only boy, turned 8 the other day, and Emily, my daughter, does real sort of designer parties, but like Sharon, you know, it's a real good spread and stuff, so people hang around afterwards. And my little 8-year-old grandson, who is neurodivergent, took it upon himself not to welcome his guests, but to get rid of them. Hey, it's time to go now.
At 12 o'clock, the party was ending.
It's 12 o'clock, you can go home now. And what we as a family have always done at birthdays is when all the other people leave, the family stays for the present opening, and we all ooh and ah and cluck. We had to do that 3 days later. He'd already opened them all in his own quiet time. But if we had fought to stay, I've got a sister who has been a teacher for about 400 years. So she loves telling, and she tried to talk her way into our after party, and has actually strained the relationship with the 8-year-old. So there's a whole lot that we as adults have to do. In transaction analysis, they talk about parent-adult-child relationships, and with a neurodivergent child, we've got to adult them more than parent them, because very often they don't accept that very genuine effort to help they'll actually push against. So it's an interesting thing. So neurodiversity is a subset of neuroscience. So neuroscience is a very interesting study that's emerged just over the last couple of years. Initially, when 200 or 300 years ago, doctors in Great Britain discovered anatomy, and Gray wrote Gray's Anatomy, one of the classic sort of standard medical textbooks now. And they developed by dissecting corpses a good idea of what the brain looked like. So you got brain surgery, and that was a sort of first understanding of the structure of the brain. And people would lift your cranium, fiddle around the brain, and learn things. The next phase came along when people began to realize that the brain actually controlled behaviors, and they began to look at what the brain actually did, the behavioral attributes associated with the brain, and that gave rise to the profession of psychologists and psychiatrists, where they would work with not the physiology but the actual working. And now neuroscience is a layer over that, where neuroscience fills in the gap between the physiology of the brain and the behavior of the brain. And it's a study of the nervous system that links structure to function. And it's a lifelong process of development, which is where our kids are, right to the generation where I am. So it's an ongoing process. It's taking place. And we need to be aware of it, because we can actually neuroplasticity says affect the way those brains work. So you may have seen that people my age should be doing Sudoku every day to stop me going more dotty than I am. And they do all these things to keep the brain plasticity working. So neuroscience is interesting, and we're going to look into neuroscience to see what research has done in order to understand ourselves and our reactions in parenting, as well as what's going on in our child's brain. So each week we'll touch on a different aspect of neurodiversity.
Yeah, so Dan Siegel is one of the experts in this, and he's written the book, The Whole Brain Child. And he speaks about the different parts of the brain having different jobs. And we all know about the left logical side of the brain, the right emotional creative side of the brain. Then there's also the lower brain. He calls the lower brain the reptilian brain, and that is our fight or flight. So when we're in a threatened space, we either go to fight, flight, or freeze. And then there's the upper brain, which is the mammalian brain, which leads us towards understanding and connection. And it's the part of the brain with knowledge and memory, and when ethical decisions can be made. When we are triggered, actually our forebrain, our upper brain, kicks out. And that's why in conflict it's best not to try and solve a problem, because the forebrain is actually kicked out. So that's why calming down needs to happen first in order to bring the logical brain back. So we're looking at, yeah, I'll have a little bit of water, thank you. So we want to look at the integration of that, where the right and the left brain speak to each other. And it's so interesting, couples therapy, you often have a right brain person marrying a left brain person. And the point is not to have that difference, the point is growing across. So the more emotional side of the brain needs to grow across to becoming more logical, and the more logical brain needs to grow across to becoming more emotional. And the triggered space, the reactive brain, needs to also calm down a little to bring in the upper brain in the more logical space. So that's integration when we can work together. I think that happens in maturity. It happens over many, many years. It happens with therapy. It happens in all sorts of spaces where we allow ourselves to integrate all those parts of our brains. And then our brains are molded by experiences. And this actually continues through life. As Anne said, there's neuroplasticity, which means that all of those neural pathways can change. So if we've got a neural pathway that grows in a certain way and we've always done it that way and that's the way our default goes, we can actually stop that and go a different way. Change can take place. And that's the good part about neuroplasticity. And then also we form our children's brains. We help to wire our children's brains in the way we interact with them. For instance, parents who speak to their children about the experiences that happened. Remember last Saturday when we went so-and-so? Do you remember what we did? Wasn't it fun when we did this? What was that child's name you played with? And what that happens is it gives the child better access to the memories of those times. Whereas, you know, life happens so fast, and I even sometimes forget, what did I do 2 days ago? Because so much has happened. So we need to help our children to develop their memories by speaking about the experiences we've had and speaking about the good memories they have. And then parents who speak to their children about their feelings, or even about what do you think that child felt when that happened. You're actually helping the child to see, okay, how do I feel? How did they feel? And it helps to develop their emotional intelligence. And so parents can directly shape the growth of their child's brain according to the experiences they offer, which is quite scary, really. Example, hours of screen time and video games will wire the brain in certain ways. Luckily, neuroplasticity means we can also change that. Educational activities, sports, and music will wire it in certain ways. Spending time face-to-face with friends and family will wire it in other ways. Everything affects the way the brain develops. But this is also interesting that it's only in mid-20s that the brain is fully wired. So even up till mid-20s, there's still a lot that needs to happen, and they can still be too impulsive or too this or too that before integration can take place. And sometimes even in adults, integration has not taken place, and that's why often people go through therapy, and there's a lot of growth that needs to take place for integration to take place. So what is integration, and what does it actually look like? And I just love this picture, and this came from Dan Siegel's book as well. And it's, imagine yourself on a river, beautiful river, and you're in a boat, and all is well, and the sky is blue, and it's a lovely sunny day, and you're just going down this beautiful little river through the countryside. You're feeling stable, at peace. You have a good understanding of yourself and other people and life. You can be flexible, and you can adjust to changing circumstances. But then something happens, and you get closer to the one bank, and the one bank represents chaos. The times you feel out of control, there are rapids, white waters, confusion, turmoil, and we shift over to that side because something has happened. Again, it's about consciousness, isn't it? Sometimes we live so reactively, we swept into that space and we just live there. But actually consciously realizing, uh-oh, I'm a bit too far over, let's move back from the bank of chaos and get back into the gentle flow of the river. It's also quite a conscious thing to do, not something that always comes naturally, but we can think about it and do it. And then the other bank represents rigidity, and that's the opposite of chaos, where you impose control on everything, everyone around you, and you're unwilling to adapt, compromise, or negotiate. And in order to survive parenting, we move backwards and forwards between these two banks. But on both sides of the bank, we will feel as though we're failing as parents and not doing the right thing. We'll feel out of control or too controlling. And all parents go through this. This happens. And we need to try and get back into the middle where there's harmony and a sense of well-being again. That is integration. And then, of course, we'll observe our kids hitting the state of chaos, where there's big feelings, meltdowns, intense anger. The white water is real, and it's so hard not to join them there. It's even harder as a grandparent not to join them there and like go into that space. And our first job as parents is to find our own space in the middle of the river. Breathe, as Anne said, and not be pulled into their chaos. So I always say put a spacer and observe first before we react and get pulled in. Put a spacer in there and just observe it first and find your own space in the middle of the river. It's hard. It requires us to stop and to breathe. And rather than becoming reactive and embroiled in their intensity, we stay in the middle of the river. So we first need to connect with them, empathizing with what they're feeling, saying, oh, this is tough, and try and settle them. They don't always take it well, I know this.
And classic example of that, Noah, the Samuel Noah, the other day we were looking after them, and he fell. Got a thick bruise. It was really quite a sore fall. And he just wailed out, "One more, mommy!" And Em runs a practice from her study, and some poor client in Hong Kong was hearing the sort of, Africa at its worst. They're killing a kid or something's happening. "Oh, my mommy!" And my response was the perfect wrong one. I said, "So do I, but mine's dead. Now shut up and be happy. Yours will come later." It didn't help. Sue had to love him. I wanted to sort him out. Perfect wrong reaction. We're not experts, and it's easy as a parent, as a grandparent, to actually do the wrong thing. The big trick is self-regulation, not just for our kids, but for our grandkids and for ourselves.
Yeah, and only after they are settled, we can, without judgment, help them to language what is going on. Don't do it when they're in that space of chaos or even the space of control. You cannot language or try and bring logic in. Do not even do it. Just do the calming, safe space. And then finally you can language. And the goal would be to bring them back to the space of calm in the middle of their river. And the same way, the bank of rigidity, they dig their heels in, they won't listen, they don't want to do it. So we need to empathize with what caused them to feel like that. What actually happened? And that is not even asking the question, because they're so rigid. They're not even going to. They're in the triggered space. They're not in the logical space at all. But try and help. Let us see what caused them to be. Try and get a bit of understanding. And often they just need space at that time as well. Instead of trying to negotiate a deal with them, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. You try and talk to them. It does not work. And so again, as a parent, we need to stay in the middle of the river and be calm, and it's not easy, and that's why self-care for parents is so important. We watched a very good podcast about a guy whose neurodivergent, and both his parents were psychiatrists, all three neurodivergent. And he said, if the only advice I have is if only my mom had looked after herself and had self-care, she would have slept better, she would have been a better person, and I would have been able to cope better with my neurodivergency. And this guy who was doing the podcast is himself a professor or something, because the parent is such an important person, and that's why self-care for a parent. And I know it's so hard because you're so busy putting out fires, seeing to everyone else, doing your own work, and where's time to actually care for yourself? And this is when you have slept well, when you're feeling healthy, when you've eaten well, you actually can cope and you can put yourself in the back of the river. But when you're tired and you're stressed, you actually can't go to the middle of the river. You just go straight over to the edges as well. So my daughter with Noah, we're using him as an example quite a lot, she actually has her practice and she has these kids and busy life is just going. And every Tuesday morning she goes surfing. Surfing is her thing. And she goes to Muizenberg and she surfs for the morning with a bunch of moms. She comes back and she can actually do life again. Don't forget to do that, whether your kids are whoever they are.
And I don't think she's even a very good surfer. She just paddles out to the back line where you can sit with no cell phones, no kids, no parents to worry about, just yourself. And then she'll paddle back in, refreshed, renewed and recharged. So, as we draw this evening to a close, this is the start of a journey where we're hoping to have a connected village as one of the end points. Now, Justin Welby, the guy who's just resigned as Archbishop of Canterbury, has run a course called a difference course. And I want to just leave with you 3 thoughts that are central to his difference course. And it's all about the neuroscience stuff that Susan touched on as well. The first point in his difference course is be present. So as we change gear now and go into a time of asking a couple of questions, I want you to realize that the people at your table, I don't think are there randomly. They're there because they want to be better parents. And you as their co-pilgrims may be the key to helping them with the problem they have. Sue and I, a couple of years ago, did the Camino. And walking the Camino is amazing. As you walk along, if you see someone with a pilgrim shell on their backpack, you know you can start a conversation with them because they've been this way before. That's what the pilgrim shell says. And it may just be to find out where the next coffee stop is or where the next loo is. But you can approach that person because they've got the battle scars, they've been there before. Now that's what I'm hoping we'll be able to achieve in this room, where we actually present in each other's spaces to hear each other, to be honest, to be energetic, to be attentive, to be empathetic towards each other. Because by being present, that allows us to be curious about each other's lives. And that's curiosity to mine the riches of the experience in the room, the power of that collective genius, where we actually don't judge each other. We ask questions for clarity. We enter into each other's lives and their challenges, and we invite them into ours. Then, if you manage to presence yourselves, if you manage to be curious, you allow yourselves to reimagine, because a trust relationship has been established, and the reimagining is as you learn from the residents in your village, the people in the room. As you read good books, you can put them on a WhatsApp group. As you experience different stages of parenting, there's a story to be told, and you can help other people reimagine themselves away from the bank of chaos to the calm in the middle of the river. So I'm hoping that as we hand over to you to do some of your processing and thinking, you will be present with each other, you'll be curious about each other, and you'll help each other through your life experience and maybe through some of the input to start reimagining the challenges that you're facing as parents. So we all need to reach beyond ourselves to do this amazing job of parenting. It's a privilege, but it's not something we should even attempt to do without the support of those around us. We see our children as real gifts.
Yes, yeah. So I was going to say, we are actually the best parents for our children. And I know when my kids were small, I'd read books and go, there's none written about my kids. Am I the wrong person, or what's going on here? But actually, we are the best parents for our children. And I think God has given us those children specifically to us, for our personalities, for who we are, given us quite a lot of challenges, sometimes for our growth, actually, and for our learning. So we do need to reach beyond ourselves. And the Bible gives us hints about how we can integrate and be the person who can model for our kids how to live. And in Deuteronomy 6, verse 4 to 9, it says, "Write these commandments I've given you on your hearts. Get them inside of you first." In other words, model for your how to live yourself first, how to be in the middle of the river, how to actually regulate, how to integrate. Do that for yourself first, and then get them inside your children. Talk about them wherever you are, whether this is your faith journey, whether it's your value journey, whether it's your life journey. Sitting at your home, walking in your street, talk about them when you get up in the morning or when you fall into bed at night. Tie them on your hands and foreheads as a reminder. Inscribe them on the doorposts of your homes and on your city gates. But the thing I like about this verse, it says, is get them inside you first. So in your own journey of spiritual formation, your kids are watching that, however that looks. What will their spiritual formation be when they look at your journey of spiritual formation? Even your relationship with your partner, how you regulate yourself, how you interact with each other. How will they be with their future partners one day? What will their future relationships look like? And obviously in the integration of your emotions and being congruent and living out the values that you hold dear, they are watching to see how you model that.